massive port deal gets caught in the geopolitical crosshairs. The Houthi threatens shipping in the Red Sea again, and the USTR proposed fees debate and controversy. Hi, it's Marcus Hand, editor of Seatrade Maritime News here, with our March news roundup, Maritime in Minutes, and I'm joined as usual by our correspondent, Gary Howard. We'll be discussing the shipping news stories that stood out for us over the last month. It's fair to say that March has been busy in the world of maritime and shipping, and geopolitics and business increasingly have been colliding, not to mention actual vessels colliding as well. All of these are stories that have made the mainstream headlines beyond just the shipping and trade media like ourselves. So Gary, why don't you get straight into it?
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, I don't think my first one would have made the mainstream headlines, maybe the financial papers. But CMB.TECH, the Severus family's shipowning company, which sort of occupies the shell of Euronav, has agreed to buy just over 40% of Golden Ocean from Yemen Holding, the investment arm of one John Fredriksen. Keen readers will remember a long-running battle between these shipping juggernauts for control of the VLCC market's future as they duked it out for control of Euronav in the boardroom. The fallout from that deal took years to settle, but hopefully this $1.2 billion sale of Golden Ocean shares will be more straightforward. The price was a significant improvement over the closing price at the time of the sale, and analysts seem pretty happy with the price that was paid. The purchase will not trigger a mandatory takeover bid, although CMB.TECH's stake in Golden Ocean has crept up since the first week of March, standing at now just shy of 45% as we speak. Golden Ocean's 90 bulk carriers would add to CMB.TECH's more humble 28 Newcastle Maxes, which I think are split sort of roughly 50-50 between the order book and already on the water. Potential merger with Golden Ocean may bring CMB.TECH more breathing room sort of financially. It's currently hovering quite close to a 30% equity ratio covenant on a $200 million bond, which I've been writing about quarter on quarter. Yeah, Marcus, I think you've chosen another March deal which sort of dwarfs my pick for the first week.
It does rather, but actually, both of these stories we're talking about were on the same day, and I was thinking when the CMB.TECH one, I thought any normal day that would have been lead. It just wasn't because of the story I'm about to talk about. The first week of March saw the unveiling of what is probably the largest ports and terminals deal ever. The Hong Kong-based conglomerate CK Hutchison announced it would be selling an 80% stake in 43 terminals in 23 countries and a 90% stake in 2 Panama terminals. Those are the ones that US President Trump claimed gave China control of the Panama Canal. The sale is to a consortium comprising BlackRock and Swiss headquartered shipping line MSC. The deal values the businesses at $22.8 billion. The proposed deal sees Hutchison exiting the port sector outside of Hong Kong and China. But it is a deal that has been foreshadowed by geopolitics, even if CK Hutchison co-managing director Frank Six stated at the time of the deal was announced that it was purely commercial in nature and not related in any way to recent political events in Panama. Now, looking at the commercial part of this deal first, it dramatically shakes up the global container terminal operating market, with MSC's Terminal Investment Limited catapulted up the league table to the top spot from 7th. Assuming this deal completes, it would have a capacity globally of 78.3 million TEU, well ahead of the second player, PSA International, with 62.3 million TEU. It also underscores the vertical integration we are seeing from the world's top container lines, aiming to control the whole container supply chain, not just the port-to-port bit. But it was the Panama part of this deal that caught most of the attention, with the sales of 2 terminals at the Pacific and Atlantic entrances of the Panama Canal, which have been at the center of political controversy. However, China has not taken kindly to the deal by the Hong Kong company, which gives up ownership of the ports in Panama and a large number of strategic port assets globally to a US investment firm at a time of heightened tension between China and the US. Over the weeks, it has ratcheted up the pressure on Hutchison. Towards the end of March, the Chinese government announced the deal would be reviewed by the State Administration for Market Regulation, scuppering an expected signing of the deal in early April. What happens next? Make sure you keep up to date on Seatrade-Maritime.com. If you're enjoying the Seatrade Maritime podcast, make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing on the app of your choice. Gary, I believe you've got another very well-reported story.
Yeah, shipping hit the BBC front page in the second week of March, a sure sign that a catastrophe has happened. Tanker Stena Immaculate was loaded with A1 jet fuel for the US military and sitting at anchor off the UK coast on the 10th of March when it was struck by container ship Solong travelling at 16 knots. Tragically, one seafarer aboard Solong was killed in the allision, although it's a miracle there were not more injuries from the incident, which resulted in a large explosion and fire aboard both vessels. That explosion was actually captured on video by an Orca AI system mounted on a nearby tanker. You can find a link to that on the site as well. We have plenty of follow-up stories on Seatrade Maritime News, including on the apparent absence of the crew on Solong's bridge at the time of the collision, and the efforts of salvors to secure the vessels and move them to safety. The 59-year-old master of Solong has been charged in a UK court over the incident for gross negligence manslaughter, and the Russian national did not enter a plea at that point. We will, of course, keep the updates coming on this story. I think the full rundown of what happened won't come for a couple of years until the MAIB investigation is released, but I'm sure there's plenty more that will come out during the course of this court case as well.
Yeah, although the court case isn't until 2026 either, so it is going to take a while. Now, for week 2, I'm picking up an item by our correspondent Paul Bartlett on bulk carrier new building orders, or the lack thereof. Now, while we have seen owners piling on orders for container ships over the last 2 years, and more recently tankers, it's been a very different story for the dry bulk fleet. According to BIMCO, the decline in bulk ordering seen in 2024 continued into the first 2 months of this year, but with even less interest from ship owners. According to BIMCO, there were only a few new contracts for bulkers placed in January and none at all in February. This equated to a 92% drop in contracting for bulker new builds year on year, and the lowest level seen in 30 years. BIMCO shipping analysis manager Felipe Gouveia cited weak freight rates, high prices for new ships, long lead times, and a widespread uncertainties as some of the main negatives affecting the market. The current order book totals 10% of the fleet, BIMCO figures indicate, which is sufficient to replace older ships in a stable market. The Capesize sector, which represents 29% of bulk carrier capacity, has the lowest order book to fleet ratio of just 8%. Not a single Capesize order has been placed so far this year. Over the longer term, renewal and decarbonisation are expected to drive renewed ordering. And Gary, I'm going to hand over to you for week 3.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just on the ordering side, it'll be interesting to see if MEPC 83 tidies anything up for ship owners ready to order any new ships, but I don't expect there to be an avalanche of orders at that point, do you?
I'd be surprised, and also the actual yard slots are getting quite limited anyway.
Safe to say there wasn't a huge amount of hope around the Israel-Hamas ceasefire improving the situation in the Middle East, and events since it was signed have kind of shown why, really. The Houthi said they would resume attacks on Israeli ships in their now notorious area of operation in the Red Sea, Arabian Sea, Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Gulf of Aden. This announcement came in response to Israel blocking aid crossings into Gaza and only applied to ships owned by Israeli individuals and companies and those sailing under the Israel flag. Instead of encouraging Israel to let the aid flow, the US responded to the Houthi threat by carrying out airstrikes on targets in Yemen, leading the Houthis to add US vessels to its list of valid shipping targets once again. These airstrikes, this attack in Yemen, has since become well known for the infamous inclusion of the editor of the US magazine The Atlantic in a messaging group on Signal discussing the plans for the strikes. As seems to be the drill for the US foreign policy, the attacks were followed by some bombastic releases and media statements about the Houthi, about Yemen and about Iran. The US Secretary of Defense has said that the US would continue to target the Houthi until the threat to shipping was withdrawn. Just yesterday, though, Trump said on Truth Social, "The choice for the Houthis is clear. Stop shooting at US ships and we will stop shooting at you. Otherwise, we have only just begun and the real pain is yet to come for both the Houthis and their sponsors in Iran." More to come on this one, I expect. Nobody really started going back through the Red Sea, so I don't think it's going to change too much in terms of operations, but we'll see.
Operationally, no, I don't think it changes much for those who had diverted, because as you said, they hadn't really got started to go back yet. And it must be said this current US administration is good at bombastic statements. Right, I'm going to talk about something very different, and that is alternative fuels, which were very much in my sights ahead of Sea-Asia 2025 in the last week of the month. And ahead of that, I sat down for interviews with both Lloyd's Register Chief Executive Nick Brown and new Intertanko Managing Director Tim Wilkins. Speaking with LR Chief Nick Brown, he dismissed the notion that shipping was too slow to decarbonise, noting that back in 2018, the industry did not really have any deep-sea vessels capable of operating on non-hydrocarbon fuels. Over the intervening 7 years, the industry has worked to develop the technology and it's now proven and ready. Indeed, the week prior to the interview, he had been in China and seen the ammonia dual-fueled engine under construction for a series of ammonia-powered Newcastle-Max bulkers due to be delivered from next year. Nick Brown's big concern, though, was the availability of low-to-zero carbon fuels, something that has to be driven by the business case rather than by regulation, as perhaps we are seeing for the engines on the shipowner side. And where will these new fuels likely come from? Well, it's going to be Asia, and in particular, China. Meanwhile, I also caught up with Tim Wilkins at Intertanko 10 weeks into his new role as Managing Director, in what was his first podcast since taking the helm of the industry body. We discussed the transition into the new role, Intertanko's decarbonisation strategy, as well as seafarers' issues and vetting. You can listen to the full episode on this channel. And Gary, I'm going to hand you over to a story that has been dominating our headlines over the last few weeks.
Yeah, there are plenty of stories. I was second to come and choose stories for this month, and I was very surprised that this was still here for the picking. But this is more US foreign policy from me. This time it's the proposal to charge a fee to Chinese-built ships calling at US ports. We have a lot of stories looking at this idea, its potential impact on shipping in the US and further afield. But I'll pick up Nick Savides' story on the cool reception that these charges received at a hearing of the US Trade Representative just last week. Nick writes that American shippers largely oppose the charge, which in other stories I think we've seen placed at between $500,000 and $3.5 million per ship call by a China-built vessel to the US. Container line representatives, the World Shipping Council, also highlighted the inflationary effect these fees would have. I think the idea behind the charges is to reinvest some money into US shipbuilding capacity and targeting what the current US administration calls unfair trade practices by China in the area of shipbuilding. Elsewhere on the site on the same topic, we've written on how the proposals would inflate energy costs in the US, looking at the tanker market, how Puerto Rico might end up a winner should the charges materialize, how some US shipping companies would just straight up hit bankruptcy from the charges. And Marcus wrote from Sea-Asia how VLCCs, Aframaxes, MR clean product tankers, Supramax bulkers and container vessels would be particularly affected by the policy, according to SSY Global Head of Research, Roara Adland. I think Nick Savides is actually looking through the latest USTR transcripts as we record this episode, so expect plenty more coverage on this topic today probably and in the coming weeks. And Marcus, I'll hand over to you for the last one.
Yes, there is going to be some more coverage today on that, indeed. And those transcripts are 400 pages long, so Nick's got a bit of reading to do. Yes, I was a tad busy at Southeast Asia's largest maritime event, Sea-Asia 2025, run by our colleagues at Informal Markets in Singapore. Managed to catch up with loads of people, so look out for interviews in the coming weeks. And as well as that, I attended conference sessions and moderated some as well. It will come as absolutely no surprise that the USTR hearings that Gary was just talking about were a major topic of conversation. Now, a couple of things I found particularly interesting were from top shipping analyst. Roara Adland, global head of research for SSY, described a traffic light system they had developed to quantify the impact on different sectors. The sectors facing a red light, where the US trade is more than the remaining non-Chinese fleet would be able to cover, would be VLCCs, Aframaxes, MR clean product tankers, Supramax bulkers, and container sectors. Only one sector got a green light. Head on over to the show notes to find out which one that was. Meanwhile, Seatrade Maritime podcast regular Adam Kent, Managing Director of Maritime Strategies International, set out how to explain how Chinese shipbuilding had become so dominant over the last 25 years. He identified 6 key factors, including local and regional government support, lower prices than Korea and Japan, and design and equipment flexibility are among those. Again, you can read the full story from the link in the show notes. And on that note, that's all we've got time for in this episode. If you want to learn more about all the stories featured in this episode, the links, as I just said, are in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to joining you on the next episode of the Seatrade Maritime Podcast.